Welcome to the NK Active podcast, and welcome to part 2 of going through the rehabilitation process and what is rehabilitation. So one thing I will pick up on there is obviously my training and your sort of core training, as it were, is with podiatrists by background. And so predominantly that's just people have this perception is just foot and ankles. Technically it's the lower limb. And obviously David's core training is more around the rehab side of things. The example you gave then wasn't a foot example, it was proximal, so around the hip region. So that does really sort of show that as podiatrists, we need to be thinking outside of the foot. And remember, there are other structures. There's a lower limb, there is a human attached to that foot. So you need to take all that into
and
consideration.
I think that's mindful, isn't it? If you have a chronic condition, it's a systemic effect, isn't it? It's not just localized or specific. So yes, having knowledge of the foot and ankle and lower limb, but it's also having that wider knowledge, health knowledge and medicine knowledge around the condition, what it does, what it will do. And then also that coaching and psychology, that motivational interviewing, understanding how we question people in a positive way rather than a negative way, and then how can we work with other multidisciplinary teams if need be to get that person where they need to be.
So Dave, talking about managing expectations, it's obviously rather important because say if you had someone come to see you, you had a form of hypermobility and had a raging Achilles tendinopathy, but turned around and said, "It's fine. I want to be running a marathon in 2 weeks." It's sort of, what would you try and do to manage those expectations? Because the odds are that's not a realistic outcome.
Yeah, and I think it's just going back to what Charlie was saying now. I think this is where the art meets the science. And working out why you've chosen this particular intervention with this individual at this time, because you might do it slightly different with a different person. So someone with those sort of aspirations, it's a lot of questioning about things that they already know. And in the assessment, we ask a lot of open questions, but sometimes closed questions can have their place. And you can ask them along the lines of, do you know someone else who's recovered that quickly? As a closed questions, yes or no, tell me more about that. Then you can open it up. What do they know? And then put the two things back together and ask them, where does your aspirations sit with what we already know? And then get them to broaden things out.
So then linking that obviously with the modern age and social media, you find there are a lot of support groups, which are great because it helps people chat and relate to people who've gone through a similar experience. But also see a lot of people asking, okay, I've got a condition X, Y, and Z. What treatment did everyone else have? Is there an issue with that possibly because we know everyone could react differently, that what treatment worked for patient Y isn't then going to work for patient X?
Yeah. And who doesn't know someone who's had some back pain or some knee pain, and when they're talking about it, my friend had that. Well, the friend's a different person with different background beliefs, different family, different history. So when you're looking at them, right, why am I choosing this exercise, this intervention for this person at this time? And for them, well, why aren't you giving me the same as my friend had? Well, your friend is a different person to you. So even though the injury seems similar, what they don't know is how close it was. Do they have any other pathologies, any other chronic conditions? Why was that chosen at that time? How successful was it? How long did it take? There's a lot of information to be found rather than the headline, my friend had this, that's what happened. Well, why? Have we moved on? How long ago was that? What medical interventions have been discovered since then? My parents have got this, so I'm really worried I'm going to go down the same line. So that's going to happen to me because it happened to them, because I've seen it. Well, we've learned how to treat that now, and it's not such a problem. So it's, again, having the discussion, open and close, and getting them to realise that there are differences, managing their expectation. Like, that's what I'll get because that's what they had.
And sometimes you are going to be the bad guy. But in my head, if I can say no, and I know why, and I've got science to back it up, and I've got the evidence-based practice and medicine, that's my job, is to sometimes give the bad news that no one else can, to make sure that person is safe. I'm weighing up risks, thinking about benefit, making sure I'm providing them with the optimal outcome. That doesn't always mean I'm the good guy.
No, but that comes back to managing those expectations, because their friend may have had a knee patella tendon problem or something, but what their friend also hasn't got, they haven't got rheumatoid arthritis or something, and they're on a cocktail of medication which can affect their healing rate and everything that's thrown into the mix as well. So that's why you got to look at everything in with open eyes and take the context of everything. And this is why we ask all those medical history questions, because we know that affects the outcome. We know that affects the rate of progression, the speed of progression we're expecting people to go through that journey. Yeah. And it's really important to take all of that into consideration. And you mentioned time earlier. I think the other thing is that when you talk about time, and with regards to the rehab, is also the time someone has to then do the exercises as well. We could email someone 10, 15, 20 exercises to do, or give them a sheet of paper that has double-sided A4. With the best will in the world, they're going to want to do those exercises. They're going to say, I'm going to do these. It's going to take me an hour at the end of my day. I can guarantee you that no one is going to do those exercises because I don't think money is the biggest commodity in modern day life. Time is. And actually, possibly one positive about this whole COVID pandemic is actually it may have given some people time back, whereas they're not commuting to work anymore. They're working from home. So we had some patients where they've got 5 hours a day of their life back from just not commuting to and from the office every day. But it's about, I think, trying to build those exercises into a manageable chunks. So I personally have a rule that if you're having an exercise to do at home and you haven't got set, embargoed, carved out time in your day to do a program, then an exercise can't take any longer than it takes to brush your teeth or the kettle to boil, so you can build that into your daily routine. What we're starting to see now is some people are actually, they've blocked out 1 hour of their day, and that time is safeguarded and embargoed, which is fabulous. But someone, say like myself, with 2 young children at home, I can try and carve out an hour of my day, but it's just not going to happen.
It's an interesting question. How are you going to manage this? When are you going to do it? How are you going to fit this in? Rather than, there's the professional athlete, there's the program, we've got plenty of time to do it. If we're going to make some changes, so you go from 10 exercises to 3, get good at those 3, then you get the next 3. And that's a different process for each person, even with the same injury. The closest background you could have, but a different program, because one's got children and travels to work and one hasn't. So they've got different programs, not based on tissues, but based on their life. And they can both work.
Yeah. And I agree. And it's like, 10 minutes is still a really valuable 10 minutes. You can still get a couple of really good exercises in there if you know that they're targeted, specific, and linked to the patient. Yeah.
Lateral band walks. You can walk. I can walk up and down my kitchen a few times by the time it takes the kettle to boil. So thinking about how do we do it here at NK. So it was a bit of trial and error in how we actually set everything up. We used to do things appointment by appointment basis, and yes, we were getting results, but not results that we were happy with. But we thought we can always be better. So now we structured it in that it is done as a preset package. We know from our audit data that on average to go through that journey to get someone back to where they want to be and to achieve that goal, we're going to have 5 sessions with them going through these exercises. So the process is that it has this set structure from, we know that from before session 1 starts, those expectations are managed. We lay out what the process is going to be. So yes, there's some flexibility within that, but essentially it is we'll see someone at the start at week 1, then see them a week later, then see them sort of 2 to 3 weeks after that, then 4 to 5 after that, then maybe 7 to 8 weeks after that. So you're gradually leaving it longer and longer between every appointment. So we can try and empower people to learn and to take control of their own problem. And we know if we're going to get any flare-ups or aggravations, it tends to happen early on, hence why the first 3 appointments are closer together. And there's always homework to do. So we use some exercise prescription software that will send videos, it will send the PDF. People can log how the exercise felt, how did it make them feel, did it make problems better, problems worse, and we can track all of that. And then it's also, we used to find patients say, oh, I haven't got this, I haven't got the bands, I haven't got any way of doing it, or I haven't got any tape or anything. So we just now, to get rid of that excuse, we supply people with all that equipment. So people leave with a bag of goodies. So then they know they've got everything they need to then carry out those exercises at home. And then we collect strength data before and after. So we say, okay, at the beginning, we do some strength tests and we work out, okay, you've got the pathology that we need to work on, but what other areas can we pay attention to at the same time? And then we then repeat that data strength collection at the end. And then we show people the progress that they've made. And it's amazing what you see, the look on someone's face when they realise that actually we've seen people's strength change up to about 300% from where they were to where they are when they finish. And for me, I think that really empowers people and really hits home that message of, right, that's it, you're done now. You can now go and continue with the exercises yourself. You can go back to your personal trainer, or what we've had to put in place, because we get so many people asking for it, is actually us then put that maintenance package and program together for people. And it's always then that first session is setting out, as we've said multiple times throughout this episode, is setting out those goals on what, okay, where do we want to be? Have we got a date in mind? Have we got an event coming up? Is there a family event that you need to be able to do something for? Or is there your own personal goal? I want to be walking X number of miles by X date. Is that realistic? Do we need to adjust that? Is that realistic? Is that something that is going to be achievable? What happens if we get a setback? Because setbacks are normal. And I firmly believe actually it's a good thing to have a setback, because all a setback will tend to mean is that you may have done something, just pushed it slightly too far that you're not quite ready for, but it helps you with that learning process. I think you learn a lot more from having a setback, because you learn, do you know what, I tried to push that walk an extra kilometre, but it's not quite ready, but I know where I am. And then you can compare, actually, wow, I'm actually walking 2-3 kilometres more than I was 2-3 months ago. So things are definitely improving. So that's the way we tend to structure it, and we know that's where we tend to get our results. And we know from our audit data that as a whole, someone coming to us, we achieve those goals 97% of the time. And then when we look at people 6-12 months down the line, and we're just collecting 18 months data as well, that those injuries aren't returning. People are still doing stuff. People are getting PVs. People are messaging just saying, no, it's fabulous. I'm still doing stuff with the grandkids. And they're the stories that we love to hear. So David, talk us through the sort of the basic principles behind sort of the rehab journey. So we've got that acute stage, and then you got that middle stage, and then you got that end stage. And obviously the exercises that we use throughout stages are different, and the goals that we set are different. So just give a brief overview of what those are.
I think this is good to work out, which is an acute condition and a long-term chronic condition, even though they may be just as painful. The healing process, we need to allow that to settle down. We need to maintain as much movement and activity as we can. So don't go to bed. Even don't stop people running if you can avoid it. Don't stop them doing what they're normally doing. As long as it's not flaring up the condition and interfering, protect what you need to, but keep going where you can. I think that's quite a strong message there. And early on, it's laying the groundwork for what's going to come. Protect that. Then start as early as you can. And that might look nothing like what you're going to end up with, but get people moving and give them the confidence to move things. The body will heal itself. So exercises don't heal. They change the other tissues around. The body's very good at healing. And then as you move and you get more healing occurring, the tissues that are being laid down the exercise intensity can increase to increase the strength of those tissues. What used to happen is we just wait till everything was healed and better and gone away, and there'd be a big scar tissue. We need to align those fibres and put some strain through them as soon as we can.
Yeah. And do we think it's then thinking that the end stage is that making it specific for the person they want to do? So if we had the goal of, say, 90-year-old Doris was to walk to the shops, do we need her to be jumping off a 24-inch plyo box?
So, it can be adventurous. If Doris came here, we take her for a walk to the pond, we'll take her for a walk down the hill and walk her back up. If they want to come up and down the stairs, right, we've got some stairs, let's walk up and down the stairs. If it's vacuuming home, get the vacuum out, we've got a vacuum here. Get them to tidy up the gym for us.
Is that why you book them at the end of the day? So it helps us with the clinic cleaning as well.
But they've used the equipment, they've used what's going to happen, it's mirroring what's coming for somebody.
And that perfectly sort of matches what you were saying earlier on about putting them in that environment where they're going to be doing this so they can address those fears and belief, because that they'll perceive to be doing it in here as a safe environment because they're with people who have the knowledge around the rehab and the injuries and whatnot. But you're then showing them that, well, yeah, you're in this environment, but I'm getting you to do a task that you are going to do when I'm not here. And look, you can do it. And from my own personal experience, when I thought it'd be a good idea to rupture most of my ankle ligaments on the outside of my ankle playing squash, and I remember it happened playing a certain shot, and I remember I come off, ended up in a heap on the floor. I heard a load of cracks and pops and thought, this doesn't look too good. Got off the squash court, ordered myself an air cast boot. I shouldn't really say this, but drove home. Then I was like, wow. And then when I went through that rehab journey and I was ready to return back to squash, I was actually really nervous about playing that shot because I had it in my mind that every time I'm going to play my shot, this is going to happen to my ankle. Yeah. And the only time that changed was when I was playing a match and I was losing against someone I shouldn't have been losing to. And I think my competitive edge got the better of me. And I played that shot. And then I completely thought, I think I played that shot, my ankle is fine. And ever since then, I was like, I'd overcome that. But there is definitely that, I think incorporating what someone's going to do into their rehab is so.
Certainly with sportsmen, if they're going back on the pitch and you say to them, like, if I asked you to jump onto or off this box or throw a javelin right now, how would you feel? And if they're not, yeah, I'll do that, the rehab process isn't complete. If you haven't built them up through the training, through the stages of recovery, strength, technical skill, and then game situations, then that's where the real specific sporting rehab takes place.
Finally, I had a conversation with a patient today about, she was asking questions about what's the definition of a successful rehab program. And my answer was that you can do the activity that you want to do and your injury doesn't affect you. Yes, it may be tender. Yes, it may be painful from time to time, but it doesn't stop you doing anything. And this was in a plantar plate patient. And so I sort of said, yeah, that may be fine. You may think I can walk to the shops and it's successful. But if you want to get back running, if you can't get back running, then that rehab program hasn't been successful because, yes, you're back to walking, but that's not what you need to do. That's not who you are. That's not what you want. And I think, using rehab and testing, this is where you're at, this is where you're going to be, and constantly keep pushing people. I think that's when you see that good progress.
Yeah, and for the activity, what do they need? They need a certain amount of strength, a certain amount of balance, a certain amount of control. And that's where the process comes in, because the outcome people can get, this is what I want to do. Well, this is how we're going to get you there. I want to walk up and down the stairs 5 times a day. Right, you're going to need balance, strength, endurance. Have you got those? Let's put those in. Now let's test on a step. Yeah. Now let's test on 2 steps. Now let's test carrying something. So it's the process that we go through.
Our gym's only 9 meters long. I don't think we can get a javelin.
The field outside.
There is actually, yeah.
But I also think it's that bit about having a chronic condition shouldn't limit you either to what you think you can do in a rehab program. I think it's relaying those assumptions. The amount of patients that wander through her door who say, I can't do this because I have rheumatoid arthritis, or I can't do this because I've had a heart attack. Actually, there's some of the barriers we need to change. That is, yes, part of your medical history. Yes, it means you may have conditions that you're managing or living with as a consequence of those reactions that have happened, but it shouldn't stop. The process is still very similar. It's just working with it and being mindful of those expectations.
100%. When people say to me, oh, I can't do this because I've got osteoarthritis, I've got rheumatoid arthritis, or I'm like, and like, we yes, we'll take that into consideration, but I don't see that as a barrier not to doing things. Yes, it may mean we have to adjust expectations of where we can achieve and what you can get to, but that doesn't mean you can't do anything.
That comes back to their belief that because they have this, so they don't. Or it's a simple case of my leg is stiff because I have this, or is it stiff because you accept that, so you stop moving it? And how much is the belief, and how much is it stiff?
Yeah, and it's young clinicians as well. I think my advice to you as a young clinician in your early career is to be mindful that actually people are incredible, and having a condition or a label doesn't define them. It's the processes and training they go under that will determine how well they do. So
in Dave's previous career, he would have seen lots of that working at Headley Court, which was, it's moved now, but at the time it was sort of the head military rehabilitation. And when I was working at the Paralympics at the 2012 games, you look at the conditions that people are living with, the disabilities people are living with, and it doesn't stop them from getting on achieving.
Where there's a will, there's a way. Where there's no will, so it is the beliefs. And well, I can do this. I've got one leg, but the other one's still pretty good. And I remember throwing a guy. He had no legs and one arm. He was sat on the floor throwing him a tennis ball because they were playing tennis. How am I supposed to serve that? In the end, he was flipping it up and joining in and shuffling around. And it was that, right, I've got to learn. I've got a challenge. I've got something to overcome. Right, what do I need to do that? There are some things you can't do. There's some things everyone can't do. What are his limits? Well, what's restricting him? It's the belief that I've got arthritis, I've got this condition, so I shouldn't. Right, there are people out there with the other belief. So what if I've got that? Let's get on and see what I can achieve.
And I would almost argue that actually with those chronic conditions, people are living with neurological conditions, arthritis, hypermobility, that actually doing rehab and exercise is most probably more important in that population group, because we need to get people moving, get people fitter and stronger, and recover from the injuries that they've got. And yes, as I said earlier, it will impact the process, but it doesn't mean the process can't happen. As I always say to patients, we don't see problems, we only see solutions. So we got that slight problem. Well, there isn't just one road to rehab. There are many paths that you can take, and it means, well, that path may be blocked, but we're going to go on this path. And okay, the journey's going to be slightly different, but all those paths lead to the same goal, and it's just picking.
I think that Charlie was saying earlier, there's a lot of fear from patients and from some clinicians about doing it wrong, or giving the wrong exercise, or not knowing how to do the exercise properly. If you think of them as movements and get people going, it takes a lot of that away. Don't overthink it, don't overprotect. If someone's moving and moving towards something, it's much more valuable than, or better keep them safe and not do it wrong.
Yeah. So Charlie, sort of coming to a close, but there's one other subject I want to have a quick chat about in this sort of, well, we spoke about a lot of just doing the rehab, but actually what's the thought process that we go through when deciding what exercises to give, when to progress, when to maybe take a step back? How do we, because also we're all experienced of doing it, so it becomes second nature to us, but can you sort of talk about that process you go through internally to make that decision?
Yeah, I think I asked myself a lot of questions. So I think the first one I ask is, how easy is the patient finding this movement? Is it challenging the tissues and structures that I wanted to? Is it even mentally challenging that person as a driving mechanism to pushing them forward? So that may be one reason why I want to amend or change or make it harder. And then kind of want to think about, how am I going to do that? What's the benefit going to be? What are the potential risks associated with that? Is it that they could load too much? Is it that they may not have quite as good technique if I start to add more load or start to change their kind of control or pivot point in some way? So do I need to modify the activity or movement pattern to be able to accommodate that? Or is it that something we may practice while they're in the session with me, and then if they seem to get better at it as they do more repetitions of it and learn that process, then I know that's actually okay and safe for them to continue on. I start to think about the conversation that I'm going to have with the patient. What are the key things I need to tell them? What are their warning flags or systems that need to be in place? What happens if pain does increase to an unhappy threshold? What should they do? What should happen if they're finding it too easy? So if they start with me today and they're out of breath and they're working hard, but actually in 3 weeks' time they're like, this is really easy, I've stopped doing them because I'm bored, then actually am I able to give them something, the progression forward? Is that part of their capacity where they're able to tolerate that? Or is it that I need to bring them in sooner so that I can then add in another session where I can challenge that thought process and movement pattern again? I then start to think about, am I targeting the right muscle groups? Am I starting to think about the other limb or other body parts that might be involved? So although they may have, say, I don't know, ankle problem, an ankle instability, I also need to start to think about, okay, how's the knee and hip moving with that? How's the lower back working? How do we have good kind of posture control and movement factors? Or are there other aspects or exercises that I might need to think about? Or is it that I might need another brain? So is it that I might need the advice of David to help me, maybe if there's a shoulder injury as well, working alongside a foot and ankle, that we need to kind of work in parallel to get that person back to moving more comfortably. And then again, I think it's about checking in with the individual. Is this still the same goal for today that you want to achieve? How are you today? How are you on most days? And then thinking about, okay, starting then to think about maybe my outcome measures. So am I achieving what I set out to do? Am I meeting the expectations of the patient? Am I noticing a change in this individual? So the worst thing I don't like to hear is when someone comes like, it didn't work, I don't feel any different, nothing's doing anything. And if that's that, I don't see a functional improvement. I don't see some sort of feeling better. I don't feel or hear about them saying, it was really hard to begin with, but today I've mastered it, or yesterday, just before I saw you. I think that then makes me start to think, right, am I targeting the right muscle groups? Am I selecting the right exercises or movement patterns? And do I need to tweak something? Is there something that I've missed? And do I need to re-question?
Yeah, and a lot of the time is when they say I haven't improved, you then speak to them, and that's maybe because they've spoken to someone else and they realise their pain is the same. But when you ask them, my pain hasn't improved, but I'm now doing 50% more before it hurts, then you're like, well, it has. They've just, and a lot of the time, because these chronic conditions, they forget where they started to where they are now, and then they say those goalposts move all the time. Yeah. So they're like, okay, I'm done that, but actually, how far can I fit? How far can I take this? And then it's also remembering that some people that they naturally just live pain as part of their normal life.
Yeah, it's that interpretation, isn't it? Interpretation of what is good and bad, and what does a good day look like, and what does a bad day look like for that individual, and then what does a day typically look like. And so you piece together kind of what their world looks like. And I think that's the enjoyment factor of rehab, isn't it? I feel like I'm a little investigator that has to collect all the little like pieces of the puzzle to then make the final.
Yeah, and I remember I had a patient with NEOA. We're doing rehab stuff with, and she suffers with ME, and we just had to accept there are some days where she's just having a bad day, and we just got to say, do you know what, we're not going to do anything today, we'll just take it nice and easy, and we'll just regroup next week and we'll see how you are, and if you're ready, you're ready, if not, we'll just push up. But it's not the end of the world. It's just accepting that and saying this is going to happen. It's not if but when, and we'll just adjust it when things come along.
Do you have any other thought processes, you two? I feel mine's quite extensive.
I think that highlighted most of the things quite well. I think it's important when things aren't going well to have that reflective process of why. Is it something, the program, something we're not doing? Are they doing too much? Are they pushing too hard? Are they not doing enough? And it comes down to the view of the character of the person. They're so keen, they've overdone it all the time, or actually, and what's the evaluation?
And I think a lot of it comes down to us as clinicians is reading. You get some patients, you give them an inch and they'll take a mile. You give some patients where actually they need a bit of gentle persuasion.
Yep.
Shall we say, I think that, and that's our job, is to read those people and say, these are the ones we need. We can be a little more stern with. These are the ones we need to just progress a little slower, because that's who they are as human beings, and we can't change that. And I think, but that's
working with them rather than at them.
Yes.
And trying to.
And that then sums it up nicely, going back to there is a human attached to the end of that problem you're trying to rehab, and you've got to take all of that into.
Yeah, I think the nicest bit is where you see someone who is a patient who doesn't have a medical background suddenly do their own reflective practice on their condition, and I think that's the moment where I know I've done my job really well. Is when they've gone, I did this didn't work, so I've done this, and I thought about this, and you were on my shoulder, and I thought about that, and now I've done this, and now I've done that, and now I'm sailing, and you kind of think, yeah, okay, I've done my job today.
But then we know we've done our, and that's, for me, is the actually key part. We know we've done our job, because then we know 6 months down the line, if they get a flare up, they know exactly what to do. They know they're not going into panic mode and melt down. That they know that they can sort this out themselves. They've been empowered. They've got the knowledge. They can now reflect on, why did this happen? Look back, pick through their diary and what's happened, because something would have resulted in that. Was that event? Could they have prevented it? Could they have changed it? Is it something that it was always going to happen? It is lovely to see people go through that process. And for me, then when that happens, you already said, then people are then taking control and they're empowered to do everything themselves.
And they're safe.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
And then they also know that if things go wrong, so what, everything you can resolve it. It doesn't, so they're not fearful of that. They're not fearful of going and doing something. They'll happily just go and do their activity. And if flares up, we'll just deal with it. It's one of the things. Yeah. Have you two got anything else you want to add?
No, I don't think so.
No, I think that covers everything quite nicely. So everyone, again, thanks for listening. If you have any questions or comments, do just pop them below, and don't forget you can subscribe to the podcast as well, and we shall see you all on the next episode. See you later. Bye.